October in London is usually gloomier than anywhere else. Light drizzles fall, covering the city in a sorrowful mist. In the small cemetery by the River Thames, bordered by drooping willow trees, the rustling leaves sound like the city's sighs. On a cold stone bench sat a 14-year-old boy, motionless. His oversized black wool coat made his inherently thin face look even more drawn, his cold black eyes staring at the rain-soaked velvet-draped coffin. But in truth, Christopher Sterling's gaze was not fixed on the coffin itself. It seemed to pierce an invisible space where his tragic memories lay undisrupted. Beside him, his grandmother, Margaret Sterling, approached, her face etched with 2 decades of hardship since marrying into the Sterling family. She gently guided Christopher by the shoulder, her voice trembling. "Christopher, it's time to go home. Everything has ended." He shook his head and lifted his gloomy eyes toward her. Part of his child's mind understood she wanted to protect him, but no matter what, the suffocating pain in his small chest would not let go. Christopher pressed his hand against his coat, trying to tamp down the shivers that ran up his spine. His parents, Richard and Helen Sterling, had died in a car accident 2 days ago. In the slippery terrain of a rainy night, tires screeched, and the car flipped repeatedly upon impact. Their bodies were mangled. All that remained for Christopher was an unbearable ache in his heart. Margaret Sterling said nothing as she gently pulled Christopher to his feet. Listening to the wet coat dragging heavily beneath them, she sighed. "I will take you back to the Sterling mansion. There, you will have all your mother and father's pictures. I swear I will never let you lack anything." Christopher said nothing, only closing his eyes. Her words were like a howling wind through the cemetery, chilling. The image of Richard Sterling, tall, always in a black suit, his voice thundering, was already shattering in Christopher's mind. He only remembered his father's rare smile driving him through Hyde Park, and his mother's warm embrace on Christmas Eve, when young Christopher, still learning to speak, whispered, "Mommy, I love you." Now all that remained were ashes. Margaret Sterling guided Christopher away from the graveyard. Outside, dark clouds swirled overhead as a reminder of the days to come. Christopher's life would now be an unending stretch of darkness, devoid of light. Arriving at the Sterling mansion in magnificent Mayfair, its red brick walls were covered in damp moss, and below lay a rose garden long since withered. The heavy iron gates opened, guarded by 2 butlers, Julius and Herbert, each bearing a military bearing. When they saw Christopher staggering through, both bowed their heads respectfully and helped him inside. Inside, the parlor still displayed the large portrait of Richard and Helen Sterling. The flickering candlelight cast pale shadows on Christopher's ashen face. Margaret led him to his private room and placed a small framed photo on the dresser, his mother and father standing in their rose garden, smiling radiantly. "They were always so proud of you, you know," Margaret said gently, her eyes brimming with tears. Christopher turned his face away, unwilling to listen. The pain was too deep, he could not shed any tears. Since birth, he had learned to stifle his emotions. Now that his parents were gone forever, he shut down his heart even further. 30 years ago, the Sterling family was among the most powerful in Europe, a chain of luxury hotels throughout London, Paris, and Rome. Christopher's father, Richard Sterling, was hailed as the hotel king for his far-sighted vision. He partnered with an arms dealer named Victor Blackwell to build accommodations for local officials. But that partnership shattered. Victor schemed to manipulate the profits and forced Richard to concede franchise rights. Their power struggle dragged on without end. Victor, embittered by being ousted, sought revenge when Richard terminated the contract. He spread rumors that Richard was smuggling weapons across borders. The news quickly spread through the European press, forcing Richard to sell his shares and withdraw from the market. Yet Richard's proud heart refused defeat. Instead of fleeing, he quietly built a new hotel chain under a different brand name, while gathering evidence to confront Victor and restore his honor. Then tragedy struck. One evening, Richard's car, carrying his wife, Helen, suffered a blown tire and plunged into the canal. The press reported the accident as heavy rain making the road slick, leaving the driver unable to react. But some of the family's loyal associates knew Victor was behind the ambush. Rumor had it that on that stormy night, Victor hired an unknown assassin to tail Richard's car. Some London police officers suspected foul play, but all related files were swiftly removed. Victor wielded his influence to suppress the evidence. In the end, the crash was deemed a simple accident. Richard and Helen died, leaving their only son, Christopher, in Margaret's care. Raised in comfort, Christopher had never known how lofty his lineage truly was. Margaret had concealed the family's business dealings, wanting him to focus on school and live like an ordinary boy. Only when his parents died did Christopher awaken to the fact that his life was bound to an age-old vendetta. He did not resent Margaret, she had protected him, but inside, he had never felt at ease. Christopher's bedroom was on the second floor, with a balcony overlooking the courtyard. Beside his bed sat a black leather armchair draped with a thick blanket, his refuge each night, eyes closed to forget his pain. Until now, he had still attended Harrow School every day, but with his parents gone, there was no one to drive him. He had to hire a private driver, Mr. Thomas, who had served the Sterling family for nearly 3 decades. Thomas was old, his posture rigid in solemnity, but his gaze was always assessing whenever Christopher's sadness surfaced. On the first day back at school after the funeral, Christopher sat slumped in the back row, gazing at the gray sky through the window. His classmates whispered about him, the cold son of the Sterling dynasty. Many dared not approach. He said nothing, his pale face neither smiled nor offered a friendly glance. Only once did a classmate named Emily pluck up the courage to gently tap his shoulder and whisper, "I'm sorry for your loss." Christopher merely lifted the corner of his mouth in a half-smile, then turned away. On the drive home, Christopher sat in the back seat, headphones on to ignore Thomas's attempts at conversation. "Master Christopher, Vera Williams is waiting for you at the private clinic in Wanford Hall. Mrs. Margaret wants you to meet her. For business matters." Christopher's eyes flickered with displeasure. "No need, Thomas. I don't need medical care anymore." His voice was steady but cold. Thomas bowed and turned off the ignition. Wanford Hall, a well-known private clinic in Knightsbridge, blended Victorian and neoclassical architecture, its white stone columns edged with golden accents in the afternoon sun. Vera Williams, a young nurse, walked swiftly down the marble corridor. Her brown hair was neatly tied back, her delicate features carried a trace of sadness but radiated determination. Vera had just graduated from the Royal London School of Nursing. Beyond her job at the hospital, she worked part-time at a nearby cafe to cover rent. For her, being assigned to care for one of London's most high-profile patients, Christopher Sterling, was both an honor and a burden. The Sterling name was so famous that anyone involved in caring for him would attract public scrutiny. Vera entered room 217. The heavy door was barely ajar, letting a faint beam of light from within escape into the hallway. She knocked gently. "Master Sterling, I'm Nurse Vera Williams. I'm here to accompany you to the doctor's appointment." Inside, Christopher sat propped against pillows, his eyes fixed on the rain-blurred window pane. He did not respond. Vera paused, folding her hands before her chest to steady herself on the high bed. "Master, as scheduled, we need to check your surgical wound again today. You should go soon too." Christopher snapped his head toward the door, his eyes flashing with fierce anger. "Who are you? I don't have any appointment with you. Did you forget to look at my chart?" Before Vera could reply, Christopher snapped shut his workbook and forced himself to rise. His wrinkled old blazer hung on his frail frame, and he swayed, eliciting a flicker of fear in Vera's eyes. She swallowed and said calmly, "I am the nurse assigned to you. My name is Vera Williams." Dr. Patel in neurosurgery said you need a long-term caregiver to monitor your condition. Christopher sneered, tears brimming but held back. I don't need any caregiver, he said, cold as ice. I'm no sicker than anyone else. I'll pass. Vera inhaled deeply. She knew her efforts would be rebuffed, but she persisted. Please, Master Sterling, regardless of what the doctor says, I can't just leave. I will return at the appointed time. For now, I need to go prepare your records in the clinic. If you change your mind, ring for a nurse and I'll come immediately. For a moment, Christopher's eyes flickered. He stood motionless, avoiding her direct gaze. Then he turned away decisively and yanked the blanket up to his chin. Get out, and don't appear before me again. Vera bowed slightly, withdrew quietly, and closed the door behind her. Behind that door, Christopher stared at the closed door, a sudden pang in his heart. For the first time, someone had come close, for purely professional reasons, and he still felt a spark of curiosity. For 3 consecutive mornings, Vera knocked on room 217 at exactly 7 a.m., carrying a tray of steaming food. Christopher maintained his indifferent stance, not a word of greeting, and his meals were almost always left untouched at the foot of the bed. Once, Vera tried making pig heart congee, spicing it to stimulate his appetite. But when she placed the bowl before Christopher, he looked away disapprovingly. Do you think I'm a child? Go eat with the kids in the ward. I don't need this. Vera closed her eyes, remained silent, and gently cleared the dishes and arranged his pillows for comfort. In her heart she vowed, he must eat or his condition will worsen, yet her face betrayed a deep, silent pain. That afternoon, Vera sat by the window, watching raindrops slide down the glass. She wondered how long Christopher would refuse to cooperate. She stood to fetch a glass of water, when the squeak of the wheelchair wheels interrupted her. She turned to see Christopher sitting upright in it, his stubborn gaze meeting her. He spoke, voice low. So you're here again? Annoying. Vera inhaled and met his eyes unafraid. Master Sterling, if you don't let me examine your wound, I'll have to report it to the doctor. It could worsen. Christopher glared. Don't threaten me. Vera was resolute. I'm not threatening. It's my responsibility. Please sign this form consenting to the examination. On the paper was printed, I voluntarily agree to undergo examination of my left arm wound and spinal injuries. Christopher glanced at it, then slowly scrawled a large X. He shoved the wheelchair forward, determined to stand. Vera hurried to support his hand, murmuring, careful. Bound by duty, Vera refused to give in to his scorn. She knew that beneath his cold words and cruel demeanor was a deeply wounded heart. If she left, someone else would take her place, and Christopher might sink into deeper despair. So she stayed. On the 5th night, the hospital lay quiet under a blanket of sleep. Vera was still at her computer, composing a progress report to Dr. Patel. Exhausted, she wanted nothing more than to go home, but just as she typed, sincerely, Vera Williams, the door burst open. Christopher rolled in slowly, mumbling, "You're on time." Startled, Vera switched off the monitor. She dimmed the lights and glanced at Christopher through the faintly lit doorway. "I'm here for the night check," she said, pointing at his left shoulder wound. "Does it hurt?" "The doctor said it shows signs of inflammation." Christopher said nothing, only lifting his eyes to her as though looking through her. After a moment, he asked softly, Where do you sleep?" Vera closed her eyes briefly before answering, "I sleep in the nurses' quarters down the hall. I'll go home right after I finish my report." Christopher nodded once and turned back toward his bed. Rarity. He had given her a sign of concern. Vera approached, gently touching his arm to check his temperature. For a moment, the hallway light glinted off his tousled hair, revealing loneliness and suffering. She hesitated before withdrawing her hand, her heart ached. "Thank you," Christopher whispered. His voice was so hoarse Vera had to lean in to hear. It was the first time Christopher had uttered gratitude. In that instant, a small spark of hope lit Vera's mind. She offered him a faint smile, gave him some basic instructions to prevent infection, then left quietly, closing the door behind her. As the door clicked shut, Christopher sat silently, watching her retreating back. A different kind of pain, pride wounded by his own vulnerability, gripped him. He had thought he didn't need anyone's care, but unconsciously, he realized he missed Vera's gentle presence. Midwinter descended on London, shrouding it in a cold grey haze. In Hyde Park, the maple trees had shed nearly all their leaves, blanketing the ground in a ghostly carpet. Inside Wanford Hall, the corridors remained silent until 6 a.m., when Vera Williams reappeared, clutching a thick folder of records, ready for their scheduled checkup. At the beginning of January, Dr. Patel had ordered re-examinations of Christopher's respiratory function and a spinal X-ray. With practiced ease, Vera helped Christopher from his room and seated him in the electric wheelchair. Every push of the wheels sent painful jolts through his body, stirring back painful memories. But over time, the physical pain ceased to be his only source of rage. Vera wheeled him toward the radiology department. Christopher looked up at the sign, "Radiology Department," engraved in black letters on a white stone facade. Vera smiled. "It won't take long, Master, Christopher. The results will be ready in about half an hour. Here, drink some water." Christopher nodded indifferently and said nothing. Vera took out her care log and jotted a quick note: January 3rd, mild hemorrhagic symptoms around the surgical wound, administered anti-inflammatory medication, close monitoring. She signed her name and handed the records to Nurse Helen. While waiting, Christopher sat silently, hands clasped. Occasionally, he glanced at Vera, who was discussing the rehabilitation plan with Nurse Helen. After removing the brace, he will start physical therapy under Dr. Turner's guidance. Vera pondered a moment, then nodded in agreement. Deep inside, Christopher only wanted to step to the window and watch the snowflakes drift down, so he could forget he was a prisoner in his own body. He had once been an innocent child who dreamed of becoming a shrewd businessman, leading the sterling empire. But now everything had changed in an instant. His legs could no longer support him, and his heart held only a flicker of surviving hope. 15 days after the examination, when Dr. Patel allowed him to wheel himself into the small garden behind the hospital, Vera was delighted. "Joseph, let's change our destination to the rose garden over there, so Christopher can smell the natural fragrance. He needs mild sunlight and warm air." That afternoon, a gentle east wind blew, and sunlight filtered through the tree canopy. Christopher was wheeled to a stone bench and sat wordlessly. Vera set a pot of warm tea on the small table beside him and said, "Christopher, the scent of roses can soothe the mind. Why don't you give it a try?" Christopher only nodded and lowered his head. The fragrance floated to his nose, and for a moment he closed his eyes, imagining himself walking along a flower-lined path in balsam. He felt his heart lighten somewhat. Though fleeting, it eased some of the agony within him. Vera sat beside him, watching him bask in the moment. She gently asked, "Christopher, I feel you're like a broken tree, you don't want the sun, yet you need it to live. Would you like to tell me about your parents?" Christopher remained silent. His eyes looked as though they were drifting into an abyss, clouded by nostalgia. Then he shook his head. "You know nothing. My parents never wanted me to know business matters. All I know are the glamorous images, not a trace of warmth. Now they're gone, what do I have left to remember?" Vera's heart ached for him. She lacked courage to say more. She stood, adjusted his pillows, and whispered, "If you ever want someone to listen, I'll be here." Christopher nodded softly, his gaze warming slightly. But he knew opening up to someone else, particularly a strange nurse, was far harder than accepting his own disability. One evening, As Vera was charting Christopher's medication schedule on her laptop, an urgent email popped up on her screen: Sterling Ventures, meeting invitation. It was an invitation from the Sterling Investment Fund, on behalf of Margaret Sterling. She wanted Christopher to attend a conference to launch a new project, Sterling Ventures, a technology and medical investment fund, and asked Vera to support the technical side. You'll handle the medical report, then transfer it to the finance team. Vera exhaled, knowing this was a rare chance for Christopher to step into the business world, even while still recovering. She glanced at Christopher, who was reading the invitation and nodding weakly. Just make sure I stay stable first. Vera nodded. Don't decline too quickly. This could be a chance to get you out of the hospital. Christopher furrowed his brow, irritation obvious. I don't want them examining me again. It's over. Vera resolutely replied. I'll be with you. I'll handle everything on the medical side. You just have to attend, listen, and take notes. Okay. Christopher closed his eyes, inhaling deeply. There were too many things he didn't want to revisit. His parents were gone. Victor Blackwell still roamed free, wearing that wicked smile whenever the press mentioned the Sterlings. He had never been directly accused, but Victor was covertly manipulating the Sterling assets, lawsuits, frozen accounts, leeching away their liquidity. Christopher had once dreamed that, if he could walk again, he'd confront Victor himself and reclaim justice. Now he was powerless to do anything but watch. At last Christopher exhaled. All right. I'll go to the meeting. But don't expect me to play a big part. Vera offered a tired smile, eyes determined. Then I'll do it for you. On the 16th floor of a skyscraper in central London, the conference room gleamed under cool neon lighting. Glossy black tables and chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows reflecting the city's twinkling lights. Margaret Sterling, her silver hair tinged with pale pink, stood at the head of the room, surveying her partners. Beside her was financial advisor Mr. Lawson, middle-aged, impeccably dressed, and two cautious attorneys. The conference room doors opened, and wheelchairs rolled in one by one. Christopher maneuvered himself forward with a cold, focused expression, quirking a rare half-smile. Behind him, Vera pushed his chair, holding meticulously prepared medical files detailing his condition, wounds, and medication dosages. Margaret's satisfied smile brightened as she announced, "My son, everyone has been eagerly awaiting your news. Sterling Ventures will officially launch early next year." Christopher nodded once, his voice hoarse but steady. "I entrust the medical portion to Vera. She will ensure I don't falter midway." Everyone smiled as Vera bowed bashfully. "Thank you, Mrs. Sterling. I will try my best." The meeting proceeded with solemnity. Christopher's gaze swept the room, meeting the scrutinizing eyes of those who once labeled him that disabled boy or that poor child. Now he sat among them, dignified, and none dared look him in the eye. Margaret Sterling announced, "Sterling Ventures will focus on medical research investment, biotechnology, and establishing a rehabilitation center named Sterling. Though my son's body is imperfect, his mind remains sound, and he will chair the medical advisory board." Christopher quietly raised his glasses, scanning the conference room. Suddenly, a man rose from the back row, tall, gaunt, with disheveled black hair and a face that bore both arrogance and menace. Victor Blackwell. His eyes fixed on Christopher, filled with malicious satisfaction. He had believed Christopher would never recover enough to appear here. Christopher clenched his knees as fresh pain shot through him. He stared at Victor for a moment, though he knew looking too long would reveal the seething hatred beneath his icy facade. Victor laughed coldly, his voice deep and hoarse. "Sterling, you surprise me." Christopher did not respond aloud, he merely whispered to himself, "Wait until next month, when my lawyer files the lawsuit, you'll be even more surprised." Victor halted, his eyes mocking. "I've been waiting for that day. Your grandparents don't realize I just need the right moment to erase your name from the winners list. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Vera checked her watch silently and helped Christopher wheel back to his seat. Christopher closed his eyes, restraining his anger. He had promised his grandmother, "I won't let emotion cloud my work." So he opened the documents on the table, flicking through market figures and charts. The meeting continued, but in his mind burned only one thought: Victor, I will not give up. The meeting ended close to 10 p.m. Vera wheeled Christopher toward the elevator. On the first-floor corridor, the hallway light cast gleaming reflections across the floor. She looked at him, noting the faint, proud smile mixed with loneliness playing on his thin lips. "Are you tired?" she asked softly. Christopher looked up at her, his gaze weary. "I'm fine. You should go home. Sleep early so you can come back in the morning." After instructing her, Vera bowed and turned to leave. The silent hallway swallowed her small figure. Once she was gone, Christopher sighed. Each time he watched Vera walk away, he felt unmoored in a hollow space. His heart was like a broken tree, needing healing to return to its former vitality. In his cold room, he sat with his back to the window. Outside, thick fog swirled, and lonely shadows drifted past the panes. He hugged his arms around himself, stifling the shift from physical pain to emotional agony. Yet when he thought of Vera's caring gaze, his loneliness transformed into aching tenderness. He whispered, "Vera, you are patient. I never knew what it meant to be cared for." Vera, somewhere along that hallway, seemed to hear his whisper. She paused, turning back toward his room. In the dim light, she saw his hunched shoulders recede into the darkness. In that moment, an unspoken conviction took root in her heart: "Christopher, I will not let go of your hand." Time passed quietly, but for Christopher, each day was a trial. He spent half of every morning studying online for his MBA, his laptop screen filled with financial charts, spreadsheets, and lecture slides. Vera sat beside him, carefully transcribing key points by hand, then converting them into medical-style reports: pain medication dosage, nutrition plan, physical therapy exercises. He looked up at her and asked softly, "Why do you invest so much effort in me?" Vera smiled without hesitation. "Because I believe everyone has their own value. And I don't want you to give up." Christopher paused, his fingers over the keyboard. His eyes shone a little. "Value. So grand," he murmured. He watched Vera meticulously organize each page of documents. He realized that in this cold world, only she hadn't turned away. The next afternoon, he and Vera went to the physical therapy room. The whir of machines, the hurried footsteps, and the antiseptic odor combined into a scene both chaotic and strangely hopeful. Dr. Turner, a middle-aged therapist with decades of experience etched on his face, awaited them. He looked at Christopher and nodded. "Ready? Today's exercises will be a bit tougher." Christopher nodded and pressed his lips together. Vera squeezed his hand, whispering, "You can do it, Christopher. I'm here." Dr. Turner instructed, "Try to sit upright, then lift your torso onto the edge of the chair. Take one pretend step at a time." Christopher inhaled deeply, stifling a groan of pain. His left hand clenched into a fist as he inched himself forward inch by inch. Vera stood beside him, murmuring encouragement, "Keep going, Christopher. I'm here for you." When Christopher glanced up at Vera, a strange strength filled his heart. He strained, breathing heavily, sweat beading on his back. Once again he overcame the physical limit, though he still could not walk steadily. He understood that to live, he had to try. 2 months later, Christopher had grown accustomed to life in a wheelchair. He had found a new purpose, planning for sterling ventures. Each evening, he and Vera sat at his desk, gazing out at the city lights. He typed investment ideas quickly. She drafted notes. They were like two kindred collaborators fueled by ambition. Vera often told him about her own family, a middle-class household in Manchester, where she was the youngest child and had to earn scholarships to pursue nursing. She longed to help patients, but she increasingly realized that compassion alone was not enough. One needed to combine science with effective management. Christopher listened, his eyes full of admiration. He recognized that, before, he thought only of revenge and prestige, rarely of building long-lasting value. Whenever Vera smiled, he sensed a warm energy. After so many years, for the first time he wanted to live for someone other than himself. One spring morning, when the young leaves were just beginning to unfurl, Christopher received an invitation from the London Business Forum, Europe's premier entrepreneurial conference. Someone from Sterling Ventures had forwarded the information, inviting him to participate in a seminar titled Entrepreneurship for the Community, Blending Profit with Social Responsibility. He looked at Vera, his eyes flickering with anxiety. "Vera, should I go? I'm just a disabled person. They might pity me." Vera smiled, taking his hand. "You have to go. You are living proof that perseverance can create miracles. They will see you as an inspiration." Christopher nodded gently, resolved. "All right. I'll go." Standing on the stage before hundreds of entrepreneurs and investors, Christopher felt his heart pound. In the audience, Vera gripped a thin handkerchief in her hands. As the bright lights shone down, his shadow stretched beyond the confines of his body. He inhaled deeply and reminded himself he must be strong. "Good morning, everyone," his voice rang out with newfound confidence. "I'm Christopher Sterling. I am in a wheelchair due to an accident when I was 18. At that time, I believed my life would be an endless cycle of darkness, but I realized disability is only part of the story. I can still contribute." They listened attentively, their faces respectful, not condescending. Christopher recounted his 2-year journey, from physical therapy to his MBA studies, to planning Sterling Ventures and the philanthropic initiative Sterling Hope with Vera. He spoke of his dream to create a rehabilitation center for the disabled, to help them become self-reliant and integrate into society. When he finished, applause erupted. Vera watched him, tears of joy brimming in her eyes. Christopher bowed his head in gratitude, then stepped off the stage. Backstage, Mr. Lawson waved him over. "Christopher, may we meet after the seminar? I want to invest in your project." He turned to Vera, his smile suddenly bright. "See? My words touched their hearts." Vera nodded and embraced him. In her eyes, Christopher was no longer that arrogant kid, but a man of character, ready to face and overcome tragedy. Later that May, on a sunny afternoon, Christopher and Vera sat by his window, the crimson blossoms of London's crimson maple trees glowing outside. They were drafting the application to establish Sterling Hope, a foundation to support people with disabilities and their families. All seemed peaceful until a flash message on Christopher's phone caught his attention. "Victor Blackwell is under investigation for money laundering and arms trafficking. His London accounts have been frozen." Christopher leaned over the desk, his eyes shining. Victor had finally been caught, a milestone affirming that all his efforts for vengeance over the past 2 years had not been in vain. He turned to Vera, emotion flooding his gaze. "Vera, we did it." Vera's face beamed with delight as she patted his hand. "You persevered. Your patience was not in vain." At that moment, they held each other's hands tightly, affirming that even if London's summer brought storms and sudden temperature changes, as long as their hearts stayed warm, hope would endure. 2 years had flown by since the day Vera Williams first appeared at the door of room 217. The corridors of Wanford Hall Hospital still echoed with her footsteps, moving in the opposite direction of Christopher Sterling's wheelchair, but the icy distance between them had long since thawed. Most of the time now, they discussed the ins and outs of Sterling Ventures' cash flow rather than simply nurse and patient. October had ushered in early autumn across London. Maple leaves were turning a fiery orange and blanketing the park benches. In room 217, his familiar hospital room, Christopher sat more sturdily than before. Dr. Matthew Patel had just finished examining the scar on his right shoulder and nodded in satisfaction. "Christopher, everything is progressing very well today. We can reduce your physical therapy to 3 sessions per week. For the rest of the time, you should rest and focus on your startup plans." Christopher nodded, a rare spark of joy lighting his eyes. Dr. Patel smiled and added, "Nurse Williams has done an excellent job caring for you. Please continue to support him, but remind him to rest on schedule to avoid overexertion." Vera bowed her head gently, pride shining in her eyes. "Thank you, doctor. I will do my best." After Dr. Patel left, the room fell silent. Christopher looked steadily at Vera, his voice calm. "Your 2-year contract with the clinic is almost up. The medical climax is that I no longer have to be in the hospital." Vera managed a small smile, though her heart sank slightly. Indeed, 2 years ago, she had been invited, via Dr. Patel's notes, to sign a 24-month contract to care for a special patient, the man then addressed as Master Sterling. The contract stipulated full-time nursing care, no withdrawal before expiration, unless by written consent. She had regarded it as a rare opportunity to gain experience caring for a complex patient. "I'm ready," Vera sighed. 2 years ago, I thought that once the contract ended, I would return to Manchester, to my family, my friends." Christopher frowned slightly. He understood that those words hid a longing for freedom. At the same time, his heart ached with panic. If she left, he would lose the most vital connection from those dark early months. "I know you want to go home," he said with a weary sigh. "But if you leave, who will stay? I haven't told anyone but you that I've always considered you my only support." Vera lifted her eyes, her gaze reddened. She walked over to the side table by his bed and placed her hand on the Sterling Ventures plan documents. "You think my role in your career is only background support. You can leave to hire someone else to replace me. I've fulfilled my 2-year obligation." Christopher said nothing but watched her, subtly clenching the edge of the blanket. "If you leave, will everything I've built suffer? I truly believe that only you understand me, both my physical limits and my mental strengths. If I hand this project over to someone else, it will falter at its roots." Vera closed her eyes, tears sliding down her cheeks. She began to cry. "You can't force me to stay. I have given my all. But I also need another life. I yearn to see my family, to live like a normal person again." Christopher grasped her hand, his voice hoarse. "You are the only person I don't want to lose. The 2-year contract has ended, but I don't want to sign another one. I just want you to stay because of your feelings, not because of a signature." Vera furrowed her brow and slowly withdrew her hand. She inhaled deeply to swallow her sobs, then turned toward the door. "If all you want is a paper without a spine," she began, her voice cracking. "I'm sorry, but I can't. I'm leaving." Having said that, she closed the door quickly, leaving Christopher sitting alone in the dim room, his throat cracking with silence. He turned to look at the sutured scar on his shoulder, then at the pages bearing his promise to keep her by his side. He swallowed his anger, his eyes sunken. "Vera, please don't go." But only the autumn wind rushed through the narrow window ledge, carrying with it a stray lock of her brown hair that brushed his fingertips. The next morning, London shone with an unusual clarity for autumn. A few crimson maples still hovered in the air above Piccadilly. Vera boarded the train to Manchester with a heart full of unease. When her feet touched the platform at Euston, her pulse quickened. She kept glancing behind her, brushing away the sweat on her brow. But gradually, those backward looks grew more faded. Her family, her parents and older sister, waited for her at the station. Her mother threw her arms around her, scolding. "You are still alive, why were you so late? What's wrong with that Mr. Sterling?" Vera forced a wan smile. "Mum. I'm just tired." Inside, however, images of room 217, where she had just left him, swirled in her mind. An emptiness began to creep in, even though she felt happy to share a home-cooked meal. Meanwhile, in London, Christopher silently wheeled himself around the garden of the Sterling mansion. Julius, the faithful butler, stood beneath an ancient fir tree and watched him. "Master, Mrs. Margaret asked why she hasn't seen you in the hospital." Christopher turned away, his voice husky. "Don't tell her." Julius only nodded, noticing the distant look in Christopher's eyes. 2 months had passed since Vera left. Sterling Ventures still enjoyed an influx of investments, and the Sterling Hope Charity Fund expanded across Europe. But Christopher's heart grew lonelier by the day. Whenever he reviewed financial reports, his laptop screen would display the folder labeled Vera, Care Plan, and he would remember how she once meticulously updated each medication schedule. He wondered absent-mindedly whether she had truly forgotten him. One afternoon, he decided to search for her old phone number. In his call history, there was exactly one entry, +44 7916 4x89. He dialed, the ringtone playing briefly before the line cut off. A text message arrived instantly. "This number is no longer in service." He stared at the screen in despair, then swiped the phone away. Winter arrived, snow blanketing Heathrow Airport's entrance. Vera received an invitation from the Royal Nursing Society, where she had studied, inviting her to a special symposium on caring for complex patients. The keynote speaker would be Christopher Sterling. The invitation clearly stated, "Mr. Sterling will present his proposal for a technology-integrated patient care model." Vera's heart sank. She knew that seeing him again could be fraught with tension, but she could not resist. The next day, she booked a late evening flight, her heart pounding as though it might burst. When she stepped onto English soil in winter, the landscape looked desolate. She silently boarded a shuttle bus, put on her headphones, and tried to steady her breath. The Grand Conference Hall of the Royal Nursing Society lay on Kensington Avenue. Hundreds of seats were filled with nurses, attendants, and doctors from everywhere. On stage, bright lights glowed over 2 LED screens displaying the Sterling Hope logo. A hum of murmured disbelief filled the air, that Sterling boy was in a wheelchair. And now he's the speaker. Vera entered, her heart pounding like a drum. She gripped her small suitcase, trying to avoid curious gazes. When she found a seat in the back row, the hall's lights flooded down. Suddenly, the backstage door opened and Christopher appeared. He wore a long charcoal coat, a wool scarf wrapped around his neck, his confidence tempered by that familiar cold reserve. His wheelchair rolled onto the center of the stage. Vera held her breath, her gaze fixed on him. He glanced over his shoulder, his deep black eyes locking onto hers. Vera instinctively recoiled as memories flooded back, the sound of nervous footsteps, the sting of parting words. Christopher raised the microphone, his voice warm. "Ladies and gentlemen, I am Christopher Sterling, founder of the Sterling Hope Foundation. Today, I would like to share our model for caring for complex patients, especially those with long-term disabilities." Applause erupted. Vera felt her throat go dry and her eyes sting. She slipped out into the hallway, leaning against the wall as she tried to steady her breathing. The feeling of being like a broken tree from before surged within her again. About 20 minutes later, his lecture portion concluded, and Christopher began the Q&A. "Any questions?" As the hall fell silent, he tilted himself toward the audience. "The young lady in the corner, please come forward." Summoning all her courage, Vera lifted her head and walked to the microphone stand. Each step felt like wading through snow. As she reached the front, the eyes of hundreds turned to her. He looked at her calmly. "My name is Vera Williams. I used to be the primary nurse for Christopher Sterling. I would like to ask, in Sterling Hope's plan, you mention integrating psychological care for patients with long-term disabilities. Could you elaborate? And in your opinion, what constitutes a sufficient companion? In that instant, the entire auditorium was still. Christopher gently tapped his pen against the podium, his gaze steady. Thank you, Vera. Indeed, psychological care is crucial. Personally, after my accident, I went through numerous despairing stages. At times, I wanted to give up. But having someone, one person, persistently by my side, witnessing my pain and hopes each day, taught me that I was not alone. They exchanged a meaningful look. Vera fought to suppress her emotion. Christopher continued. A companion need not be a doctor or a high-level psychotherapist, they simply need to know how to listen and be patient enough to wait for the patient to open up. When we designed our integrated clinic model, combining physical therapy with psychological counseling, we wanted to recruit both volunteers and nurses with a patient, enduring attitude. Because sometimes, a single handhold or a sharing look can save a life. Vera nodded, her heart fluttering. She knew that in each of his words lay not only medical management experience but also a painful journey that only they truly understood. When the Q&A concluded, the auditorium burst into lengthy applause. Vera stood quietly among the crowd, watching him leave the stage. Her heart ached. She saw that the light within him, one she once thought had gone out, was burning brighter than ever. That evening, Vera returned to the hotel near the conference hall. She opened her suitcase, pulled out a thick sweater, and slipped it on. Suddenly, her phone buzzed, a text from Christopher's old number, no name displayed. Vera, I know you're here. If you can, please meet me in the ground floor lobby at 9 p.m. Her heart galloped. She sat down by the window, gazing out at London's glittering night. The Mona Lisa bar, a chic cafe on the hotel's ground floor, was quieter than usual. She took measured steps down the hall, trying to control her emotions. When she arrived, he was already waiting at a dark wood table. A single candle flickered, casting just enough light to reveal his contemplative face. Christopher leaned forward, his voice hoarse. You came. Vera only nodded, her eyes rimmed with tears. She sat opposite him as the aroma of coffee and soft glow warmed the air. She exhaled. I don't know where to begin. After the symposium. Christopher interrupted her gently. You don't need to say anything. I heard your question during the Q&A. You're still the same, willing to speak up for patients. Vera lowered her head, her voice choking. I left you when you needed me most. He looked at her, sorrow flickering in his eyes. I didn't force you to stay for my own sake. I wanted you with me because. Vera gripped her sleeve and sobbed. But I left. Did you believe I could ever forget you? Christopher inhaled deeply, his voice trembling. I just want. You wouldn't speak up for me. His eyes shone with feelings too complex to voice directly. Vera lifted her gaze and met his. I cannot forget, Christopher. Over the past 2 years, I witnessed each painful step you took. But I also saw that you would never admit you needed anyone. He gave a wry half-smile. I don't want others to see me weak. Vera wept openly. You've always been cruel to yourself. I saw you lying awake, studying for your MBA, programming your investment plans, building Sterling Ventures just for revenge against Victor. Yet you realized revenge only left you hollow. After the symposium, you saw you could save others from the same pain. Christopher reached out quickly to wipe her tears. For the first time, he carefully placed his palm on her cheek, so gently. His voice choked. Vera, you were beside me when I had nothing. You weren't an obligation, you were a gift I never expected. Vera squeezed his hand, smiling through her tears. I only wanted to see you happy. But I didn't want to be forced into it. He smiled softly and whispered, you no longer have a contract. If you agree, stay because your heart chooses to, not because of a signature. In that candlelit space, they were alone together. Vera held his hand tightly and finally nodded, quietly. "I agree." A single tear rolled down his cheek. For the first time in 2 years, Christopher truly smiled. 2 weeks after their meeting at the Mona Lisa bar, Christopher and Vera officially became a couple, no longer bound by the contract that had held them apart. On a chilly Sunday morning in London, warmth filled the Sterling mansion. Vera descended the porch steps, her hands tucked into her coat pockets. She looked up to see Christopher seated by the window, intently scrolling through business news on his tablet. Weak rays of sunlight filtered through the glass panes, illuminating her brown hair like a small flame kindled in the depths of winter. Vera offered a gentle smile and came closer, her voice soft. "Christopher, you have a meeting today with the charity planning team. Why don't I join you?" He glanced up, his hand still brushing the edge of his tablet. His gaze softened when it met hers. "You have hospital duties this week. You need to prepare the medical report for the new project review. I don't want to interfere with your schedule." Vera shook her head. "I've already lined everything up. The Sterling Hope project is important. I want to be there with you. Besides, you're remarkable, and you need moral support too." Christopher smiled quietly and gently touched the back of her hand. "Then I'll wait for you to get ready, and we'll go together." 6 black leather chairs were arranged in a semicircle around the walnut conference table on the second floor of the Sterling mansion, recessed lights shining down on its surface. Margaret Sterling presided at the head, her face more radiant than usual. "Vera, you're here. Take a seat here," she greeted. Vera entered, bowed slightly to Margaret, and sat beside Christopher. Mr. Lawson, the financial advisor, and Dr. Turner, the physical therapist, were already seated, looking on with supportive expressions. "Today we will discuss the House of Love program," Margaret began. "This is the proposed site for a rehabilitation center that integrates physical therapy with psychological care for people with disabilities and their families. Christopher, I'd like you to present the detailed steps." Christopher gave a confident smile and stood. He connected his tablet to the projector, revealing a meticulously designed slide deck. One slide after another appeared: project name, objectives, and the collaborative approach among medical care, psychological counseling, and vocational training for patients. "The greatest strength of this model," he explained, "is creating a welcoming space that combines a physical therapy gym with a communal living area. Patients can socialize, participate in crafts, and receive counseling focused on community integration." Dr. Turner nodded in agreement. "I fully support this holistic approach. If we could add a small studio for yoga and meditation instruction, it would be even better." Vera hastily took notes. "I will coordinate the psychological counseling and community activities. We plan to invite several volunteer groups to assist with staffing." Mr. Lawson, ever focused on finance, asked, "What is the estimated cost for the entire project, Christopher?" Christopher spoke deliberately. "The total projected cost is about £2.5 million, covering construction, physical therapy equipment, and basic staff salaries for the first 18 months. We've already raised £1.2 million through the Sterling Hope Fund, so we need roughly £1.3 million more." Margaret smiled. "Our family will contribute a small portion, around £200,000. For the remainder, we'll seek additional sponsorship from community organizations." Everyone nodded in agreement. Vera glanced at Christopher, her eyes filled with encouragement. He returned her gaze with a warm, steady smile and said, "Thank you all for your trust. With everyone's collective effort, I believe the House of Love will open on schedule." As the discussion concluded, Vera left the meeting room while Christopher stayed behind to go over some technical details with Dr. Turner. Margaret stepped out into the garden corner and gently called after Vera, "Vera, may I have a word with you?" Vera looked up and nodded, following Margaret into the small garden. There, Margaret regarded her with sincere admiration in her eyes. "You've done an outstanding job. I know you have many personal plans, yet I'm deeply grateful you've always been by Christopher's side, not just as a professional partner, but as someone he truly trusts." Vera felt slightly awkward and shook her head. "Please consider me part of the Sterling family. I don't want my work to offend anyone." Margaret offered a gentle smile. "Our family's story is complicated, and you understand that. But I want you to rest assured, I'm not forcing you. You are here because you trust Christopher and because your heart has chosen to be with him. Whatever happens, I will always respect your decision." Vera hesitated, her eyes glistening. "Thank you, Mrs. Sterling. I only hope to offer him some comfort after all the hardships he's endured." Margaret patted Vera's shoulder lightly. "For example, at our Greeting Day celebration at the end of next month, the Sterling family will hold a gathering. I would love for you to attend so our family can fully understand your relationship with Christopher." Vera's heart fluttered at the mention of Greeting Day, the Sterling family's annual gala for acknowledging new investments, a major event where private lives would be put under a spotlight. She offered a determined smile. "I will do my best to arrange my schedule." Greeting Day took place on a Saturday afternoon in November. From the driveway to the iron gates, the Sterling mansion was lavishly decorated with golden fairy lights and small red lanterns, a nod to Asian festivities blended with a Western aesthetic. Guests included investors, business partners, and the family's close friends. Vera wore a floor-length, dark navy evening gown, simple yet elegant, and hailed a taxi to the mansion, her heartbeat racing as the gates swung open. Thomas, the longtime driver, greeted her at the entrance. Driving down the tree-lined driveway, the fallen golden leaves of autumn carpeted the path. The mix of enchantment and excitement made Vera's anticipation flutter. Inside the spacious drawing room, guests mingled and laughed, exchanging congratulations. All eyes were drawn to Christopher seated in his modern electric wheelchair, dressed in a crisp black suit and light gray scarf. He looked every bit the poised host as he greeted each attendee. Margaret stepped onto a small dais amid the crowd and spoke clearly. "Thank you all for attending the Sterling family's Greeting Day. This year, not only do we celebrate the anniversary of the Sterling Hope Fund, but we also commemorate Christopher Sterling, our fund's founder, officially assuming the role of Chief Executive Officer of Sterling Ventures." Applause erupted throughout the room. Vera joined the throng and looked toward Christopher. His eyes met hers, and he offered a confident smile. Among the guests, whispered remarks circulated: "He's so resilient, once disabled, now he's guiding the charity and the company steadily." A few middle-aged men near the back, their expressions scrutinizing, recalled that Vera had once been Christopher's nurse. One of them, his voice tinged with disapproval, asked as Vera passed by, "Are you Mr. Sterling's new wife?" Vera offered a polite smile and replied softly, "I'm Mr. Sterling's colleague. I assist him in community healthcare initiatives." He glanced at Christopher and then chided her with feigned disdain. "Healthcare? Now that Mr. Sterling is CEO, I think he needs something more significant than that." Vera avoided his gaze and moved on to Christopher's side. He welcomed her and leaned close, whispering, "Don't mind them. They just don't understand." Vera exhaled in relief and rested her head on his shoulder. "I just want to have a respectable place here." Christopher grinned. "I'll introduce you to everyone, so they know you're much more than just a caregiver." He rose and asked a staff member to reposition his wheelchair at the center of the room before addressing the assembled guests. "Allow me to introduce Vera Williams, Executive Director of Social Care and Deputy Manager of the House of Love Project." Another round of applause broke out. Many guests turned to offer Vera looks of newfound respect. A friendly, seasoned investor approached her and shook her hand warmly. "Ms. Williams, I've heard you've stood by Mr. Sterling for so many years. I believe today you will help the fund thrive." Vera offered a heartfelt smile, her voice sincere. "Thank you very much for this opportunity and your trust." Throughout the evening, Christopher and Vera appeared as a powerful pair. They greeted guests together, posed for photos, and each gave a brief speech about future directions. No one dared think of Vera as that nurse from before. Tonight she shone in her full capacity as a capable executive. Before the event concluded, Christopher gently took Vera's hand and led her out to the small balcony overlooking the night scene. Cars hurried below, and street lights sparkled like stars. He leaned close and softly said, "Tonight I want to thank you for staying by my side and not caring what others say." Vera rested her head against his shoulder, smiling. "I know only you truly understand me." He leaned in and placed a gentle kiss on her forehead. In that moment, the warmth between them transformed the wintry London air into a hushed tranquility, reminding them both that after so many trials, they had finally found each other. Winter fully enveloped London, draping the Sterling mansion in a thin veil of frost. By December, amidst the festive Christmas lights, Christopher prepared for the House of Love project's groundbreaking ceremony scheduled for February of the coming year. Yet in the corporate world, challenges seldom come as a single gust of wind. One Monday afternoon, as Vera was reviewing medical files for the project, Christopher received an email from Mr. Lawson's law firm. Legally, several major companies are preparing takeover bids for Sterling Ventures. You must decide quickly. Frowning, Christopher glanced at Vera, who had turned down all coffee invitations and was working quietly at her desk. He typed a quick message, "Vera, please join me in the conference room." On the first-floor conference table, crafted from marble, laid out were the project development maps. Christopher closed the door and faced her. "I have bad news. They want to buy Sterling Ventures at a very high price." Vera looked up, her eyes sharp. "Who are they?" Belina Corp., the international conglomerate known for high-end real estate development and financial investment. They want to absorb us into their healthcare division. Vera bit her lip. "If we align with them, we'll gain resources, but we may lose control over the charity project." Christopher nodded gravely. "I cannot allow Sterling Hope to be sidelined. The House of Love is our shared passion. I want Sterling Ventures to remain independent, or at least, ensure that our charity fund continues to be run by us." Vera clenched her fingers on the table's edge. "Then we need to prepare a counterproposal. Do you need me to handle the medical and community impact data to strengthen our social influence?" Christopher smiled, warmth returning to his eyes. "Exactly. All the documentation you've prepared over the past 2 years will prove that Sterling Ventures cares about more than profit. I'll coordinate with the finance team to set precise terms. If they purchase us, they must maintain our charity model." Vera felt a surge of renewed energy. "I will do my best with my portion." Over the following week, Christopher and the legal and finance teams raced against the clock. Vera busied herself gathering healthcare statistics and compiling reports on the outreach program at the hospital, demonstrating Sterling Ventures' positive social impact. Over 500 patients with disabilities supported in the past year. Read the highlight on the main presentation slide. It was their collective pride. One afternoon, Mr. Lawson summoned Vera into his office and handed her a preliminary contract. "This is Belina's proposal. They want to buy 60% of our shares for £10 million. If we keep the House of Love operating as it is, the remaining 40% will stay under Sterling Ventures management." Vera leafed through the pages and shook her head resolutely. "That won't work. They will interfere heavily with our long-term strategy. Our community care efforts could be scaled back and eventually fade away." Mr. Lawson pondered. "How do you propose we respond?" Vera was firm. We only accept the offer if they guarantee our charity model's independence and grant Sterling Hope final decision-making authority. Mr. Lawson nodded. Sensible. I'll consult with Christopher. Just as they escalated their counter to Galena Corp., another email made Christopher's face go pale. It was from the London District Prosecutor's Office. The investigation file on Victor Blackwell has been extended. It appears some of his old associates are trying to reopen the case to block Sterling Ventures' expansion. Christopher looked at Vera, alarm in his voice. Victor still won't let us be. Vera clasped his hand. We'll face him together. You're not alone. Christopher closed his eyes and inhaled deeply, determination coursing through him. I will contact our lawyer to block any machinations from Victor and Galena Corporation. Will you stand by me? Vera smiled and nodded. I will be by your side. In February of the following year, in the biting late winter cold, the groundbreaking ceremony for the House of Love was held on a planned site in suburban London. The ceremony opened with a speech from the UK Secretary of Health, a powerful advocate for Sterling Hope's community-based model. She introduced the project. This center will be a beacon of hope for thousands of people with disabilities, helping them reclaim their self-worth through physical therapy, psychological counseling, and vocational training. It is the voice of compassion at the heart of entrepreneurship. All the distinguished guests and the press applauded thunderously. Vera stood beside Christopher, dressed in a pale gray wool coat and a bright red scarf. Tears of happiness welled in her eyes as she saw the House of Love, a dream conceived 2 years ago, finally take the name of Sterling Hope. Kneeling at the edge of the stage, Christopher's voice trembled as he spoke. I would like to thank Mrs. Margaret Sterling, Mr. Lawson, Dr. Turner, and all our dedicated volunteers. Most of all, I want to thank Vera Williams, my companion who never hesitated to face difficulties from the very beginning. Glistening tears traced down Vera's cheeks as she stepped forward and embraced him. The crowd erupted into a fresh round of applause. Though the air remained cold, their hearts blazed with warmth. After the groundbreaking ritual, a throng of reporters swarmed them for interviews. Mr. Sterling, what has driven your unwavering perseverance? Christopher looked at Vera before answering. Because I have experienced many losses, my parents, my legs, my faith. But when I found Vera, I understood why I wanted to live, not only for vengeance, but to build hope for others. Vera squeezed his hand and whispered, "We did it." Cameras clicked furiously as reporters captured their victorious smiles amid the frigid breeze. From their beginnings as two strangers with countless barriers between them, Christopher and Vera now stood hand in hand, their faces radiating hope, like spring blossoms blooming anew in a barren winter garden. Though they knew storms still lay ahead, rival corporate factions and Victor Blackwell lurking with his allies, they trusted that, bolstered by love and hope, they would endure. In March, the first buds of spring began to peek out along the streets, signaling a new cycle of life. Yet inside the Sterling mansion on Mayfair Avenue, the atmosphere was heavier than ever. Though the groundbreaking ceremony for the House of Love project had elicited positive public response, the glow of its success belied the tense legal and financial issues lurking beneath. At dawn, as the first pale rays of sunlight slipped through the mansion's antique windows, Christopher Sterling and the legal and finance teams convened in the first-floor boardroom. Laid out on the polished mahogany table was the contract Galena Corporation had just sent: acquire 60% of Sterling Ventures shares, with veto power over any decisions related to Sterling Hope. Mr. Lawson, the financial advisor who had guided Sterling Ventures for the past 8 months, adjusted his glasses and exhaled softly. Galena's offer is extremely tempting financially, but they cannot interfere with your charity operations. If we don't push back, they'll seize control completely. Christopher pressed a finger on the table, resolve in his voice. We will not sell. I intend to keep Sterling Ventures and Sterling Hope wholly independent. They may try to buy 60% of the shares, but I will keep full control. Dr. Turner, the project's medical director and physical therapist, nodded in agreement. We can reach out to compassionate social investors and launch a community fundraising campaign. Organizations that champion disability rights won't want to see Sterling Hope absorbed by a real estate conglomerate. Vera Williams, now Deputy Executive Director of Social Care and Deputy Project Manager for the House of Love, opened a thick folder. I've compiled documentation of Sterling Hope's social impact, over 500 patients supported in the past year, 200 families receiving free assistance packages, and numerous awareness workshops. We can present these figures to supporting organizations and ask them to buy shares instead of Galina. Mr. Lawson nodded and smiled. Exactly. We'll launch the Green Campaign, a community fundraising drive for our charitable project. I'll coordinate with PR right away. Christopher spoke gravely. The plan is as follows: 1. Amplify Sterling Hope's presence in the media. 2. Organize a series of fundraising events. 3. Sign agreements with NGOs that support disability rights. 4. Recruit prominent public figures as goodwill ambassadors. Vera, you will oversee tasks 3 and 4. I'll handle the media and financial strategies. Vera nodded enthusiastically. I'll reach out to the Disabled People's Association and the Royal Society of Physiotherapy. They may allocate dedicated grants for us. Dr. Turner added his support. I will also propose that leading psychologists and physical therapists join as honorary advisors. The meeting ended in a spirit of urgency and warm camaraderie. Christopher looked around at each colleague and smiled. Thank you, everyone. We will prove that success is most enduring when it serves the community. That day, while Vera was in Bloomsbury meeting with representatives from the Disabled People's Association, her phone suddenly rang. On the other end, a voice seething with anger snarled, "Williams, you and Sterling better think twice before you pursue this path. I don't want to see either of you blocking my company's progress." Vera's body stiffened. She recognized that voice immediately as Victor Blackwell's, her family's perennial foe. Through gritted teeth, she replied, "You are." He cut her off with a mocking laugh. "Call me the guardian of my interests, if you don't want the House of Love extinguished before it even truly starts." Vera hung up, her heart clenching painfully. Without needing to look further, she knew that Galina had ties to Victor. Somehow, he was collaborating with them to undermine Sterling Ventures. Steeling herself, she glanced at her paperwork. The meeting was about to resume, and she had to conceal her worry from the Disability Association staff. That evening, in a plush room of the Sterling mansion, Christopher replayed Victor's harassing message. He pressed play on the recording and heard the venom-laden threat, "I won't allow you two to stand in the way of my corporation's expansion. Remember, Victor Blackwell never forgives his enemies." He pitched the phone onto the table, his eyes burning red. Vera entered moments later, saw his distress, and immediately wrapped her arms around him from behind. "You shouldn't listen to him." Christopher ground his teeth. "How can I calm my anger when Victor still plots to destroy every effort we've made?" Vera wiped away her own tears, her voice trembling as she spoke. "I don't want you to be consumed by hatred. We must rely on reason, not emotion." Christopher exhaled sharply. "I can't forgive him. I still remember my parents." Vera said nothing, quietly brushing his cheek with a hand. "But you mustn't let your anger destroy what we've built. If you remain enraged, Victor will delight in seeing you fall victim to the past." He closed his eyes, drawing in a shaky breath. In that moment, he struggled between two powerful forces. One was the fiery hatred inside him, and the other was the love he felt for Vera and their shared community mission. Finally, he whispered, his voice trembling, "I don't want to lose you." Vera squeezed his hand and answered softly, "Let me stand by you. We will overcome this together." The very next day, Sterling Ventures issued a press release announcing the Green campaign aiming to raise £1 million in community funds within 6 months for the House of Love. News of Sterling Vanguard partners collaborating with the Disabled People's Association and the Royal Society of Physiotherapy flooded the media. Vera personally served as the spokesperson for the campaign's launch at Kensington Hall. Standing on stage before cameras, she spoke with confidence. "I am Vera Williams, Deputy Executive Director of Social Care at Sterling Ventures. We believe that anyone who overcomes physical limitations deserves emotional support and opportunities to integrate fully into society. With the Green campaign, we call on the community to join us, not only with financial contributions but also with genuine moral support." Thunderous applause filled the auditorium. Footage of Vera's address appeared repeatedly on that evening's television news. Green campaign, Sterling Hope urges community to reimagine disability care. Meanwhile, in Galena Corps' boardroom, pressure weighed heavily on the executive's shoulders. If they failed to acquire 60% of Sterling Ventures by April 30, their entire takeover plan would be paralyzed. Galena's CEO, Carlisle York, sighed deeply. "Victor, we can't let their campaign succeed." Victor Blackwell laughed coldly, his eyes glinting with malice. "You focus on this Green campaign. I will enlist my networks to sabotage their credit lines and throw Sterling Ventures into turmoil." Thus the tug-of-war over control and social influence intensified. Sterling Ventures now had a huge opportunity to mobilize community funding, but they could not afford to underestimate Victor's covert schemes. Mid-April brought sudden spring showers across London, making the air feel even colder. The Green campaign entered a critical phase, the Day of Hope fundraising gala at the Royal Sadler's Wells Theatre. Over 2,000 guests attended, including celebrities, business leaders, and individuals whose lives had been changed by Sterling Hope. Wearing a pale lavender blue evening gown, Vera stepped onto the grand stage and smiled radiantly. The glittering lights formed warm arcs overhead, softening the chill in the hall. She drew a deep breath and began. "Ladies and gentlemen, Day of Hope is not only a fundraiser but also a reaffirmation that transforming the lives of people with disabilities begins when communities come together." A video lit up the screen behind her, showing patients who had once been disabled but were now reintegrated into work and study. Interspersed were short clips of Christopher's own journey, from his time bedridden, enduring pain, to rising to speak at the London Business Forum. The audience burst into applause. Christopher, seated in the front row beside Margaret, beamed with pride. Even some skeptics of Sterling Ventures among the guests watched with newfound admiration. After Vera's introduction, it was Christopher's turn. He stepped forward confidently. "I was born into a wealthy family, but you may be surprised to know how I lost everything in that accident. In that moment, I thought my life was over. But thanks to..." He looked toward Vera, his gaze full and sincere. "Thanks to one determined woman who stood by my side, I realized that faith in life is the greatest treasure of all. That woman is Vera Williams, who has helped me build Sterling Hope." A portrait of Vera appeared on the screen above him, and she felt tears well in her eyes. Margaret, seated nearby, shone with pride. Donations began flooding in, benevolent guests lined up to contribute, and by night's end, the total had surpassed £1.2 million, enough to complete the first phase of Sterling Hope. On the same day, in front of press and health officials, London's court officially announced the final results of the Victor Blackwell investigation. The serious charges of money laundering and arms trafficking were closed. Some of Victor's former associates had been arrested for money laundering, and all assets linked to criminal activity were seized. The news spread like wildfire. Victor Blackwell's empire collapses, Sterling Ventures triumphs. For the Sterling family at large and Christopher in particular, this announcement felt like a cool breeze that blew away past shadows. That evening, as a breezy early spring wind rustled Mayfair's maple leaves, Christopher and Vera returned to the Sterling mansion with Margaret. In the warmly lit drawing room, Margaret set 2 steaming teacups on the coffee table before them and said, "I'm so proud of both of you. Today, I know that love and ideals are never in vain." Vera looked at Margaret, brows knitting slightly. "You've done so much for us, but without you, we might never have stood together." Margaret smiled gently, her eyes full of affection. "I only hope you never forget, however successful you become, family will always remain your safe haven." Christopher took Vera's hand and smiled broadly. "Thanks to you, we have made it this far." The tea steamed invitingly on the table, golden lamplight dancing across the ornate ceiling. In that moment, every corner of their hearts seemed to glow with warmth. By late April, the House of Love, funded by Sterling Hope, officially opened in East London's outskirts. Hundreds of people with disabilities and their families came to receive medical care, physical therapy, and free life skills and vocational training. The hallways were lined with paintings and handcrafted postcards made by the patients themselves, a living testament to their renewed faith and hope. During the ribbon-cutting ceremony, when the red ribbon was finally severed, symbolizing the rebirth of so many once broken hearts, Christopher and Vera stood hand in hand before the crowd. Laughter and cheers filled the air, drowning out the city's noise beyond the doors. Margaret, standing beside Mr. Lawson and Dr. Turner, beamed with satisfaction. They have proven that when love and ideals unite, nothing is impossible. Later that evening, they returned to the Sterling mansion. In the small study, its black leather chair framed by Christopher's parents' charcoal sketches, his wheelchair rested next to a walnut desk piled with documents. Christopher wheeled himself in, his expression contemplative. Vera approached and gently draped a knitted shawl over his shoulders. "Is there anything left for you to finish tonight?" she asked softly. He gave her a gentle, tired smile. "You've devoted all your energy to the House of Love today. All I want is a peaceful evening by your side." Vera's eyes glistened as she nestled against him. "So do I." Outside the window, London's lights glittered beneath the early spring breeze that carried the scent of budding flowers. In that moment, past sorrows, lingering anger, and the weight of legal and financial battles all gave way to serenity. Embracing one another, they knew that however many storms lay ahead, together they would weather them. London had fully bloomed into spring. The scent of magnolia filled the air along Kensington Street, where the Sterling mansion stood. One May afternoon, as gentle sunlight warmed the moss-covered roof tiles, Christopher, Vera, and Mrs. Margaret attended a family gathering in honor of Mother's Day. The small, intimate celebration took place in the main dining room, centered around a long walnut table set against cream and white decor. On the table, fine porcelain plates were arranged next to softly scented candles, and a chocolate-covered cake topped with vibrant green basil leaves lent a fresh touch. Margaret smiled as the final guests arrived: Dr. Elizabeth Turner, Dr. Turner's wife, Mr. and Mrs. Lawson from Saxony, the financial advisor and his wife, and a special guest, Dr. Emily Ng, who had provided psychological counseling for the House of Love in its early stages. Once everyone was seated, David Lawson, son of Mr. Lawson and Sterling Ventures applied technology advisor, raised a glass of rosé. "Let us toast Mrs. Margaret Sterling, who has navigated and protected the family through so many trials, so that today we have both the House of Love and a thriving Sterling Ventures." All eyes turned to Margaret. She nodded, her eyes sparkling with happiness. "Thank you, my children and grandchildren, for standing by me. I only wish to see my 2 grandchildren, Christopher and Vera, continue building their future." The meal began warmly. A soft violin melody mingled with the clinking of glasses, creating a harmonious backdrop of reunion. Across the table, Vera reached for Christopher's hand, her eyes full of affection. "Do you remember last spring, when the snow still lingered? I dreamed that this year we would welcome the warm sunshine together, volunteer for people with disabilities, and Finalize a wedding date. Christopher looked at her, placing his hand over hers, his voice warm. I remember. I, too, imagine that right now we're planning our wedding so that we will never be apart. On the other side of the table, Mrs. Turner nodded in support. Vera, Dr. Turner and I cherish your relationship with Christopher. Whenever you two are ready, choose a date and we will stand beside you. Christopher smiled in her direction. Thank you, Dr. Turner. We're thinking of July or August, when London is at its brightest. They chatted and laughed about small details, the late afternoon sunlight growing ever more golden. In that moment of family togetherness, the turbulent past, through disasters and agonizing days thought to never end, felt as though it had receded, making room for a future that felt pure and hopeful. The next evening, as the streetlights came on, Christopher and Vera strolled along the Thames riverside. The cobblestone path stretched under drooping willow branches. In the distance, the London Eye glimmered in the sunset. Pebbles crunched softly beneath their feet as the occasional taxi horn joined the life's symphony. Vera slipped her arm through Christopher's and asked with a smile, "Do you have any concerns about our wedding?" Christopher paused and looked into her eyes, his voice sincere. "I only worry that I'm not worthy. Because I'm still disabled, I cannot walk beside you like other men." Vera smiled gently and touched his arm. "I know you think that. But in my eyes, you are the strongest, bravest man. I don't need you to stand on your legs, I need you to stand by my side. And you already have." Christopher inhaled deeply, his voice trembling. "You make me feel that I can walk forward even without needing my legs. I will rely on our love and ideals to stand strong for the rest of my life." In that moment, the river beneath the bridge reflected the twinkling city lights, as if affirming the promise in his heart. Vera leaned closer and kissed his cheek softly. "Then let's plan our wedding now, so that no one can ever pull us apart again." Christopher squeezed her hand, his eyes shining brightly. A lifelong promise. About a week later, Vera received a pink invitation from her family in Manchester. Her mother, June Williams, cordially invited her to attend the homecoming gala at the Royal London School of Nursing, where the former student nurse had become the leader of a major charitable project. Early one morning, Vera boarded a train at King's Cross. Her second-class compartment was cozy, with sunshine draping across the small window, stirring memories in her soul. She recalled her hard days as a student, working late nights, dreaming of a day she could prove herself. Now, on the train, she looked at an old photograph, a small graduation party, with laughter in the background. Pride and longing for her parents welled up in her heart. By midday, she reached Manchester and was greeted warmly. Her father, Henry Williams, still tall and kind-eyed, and her mother, June, waited on the platform. When they saw her step down, her mother rushed forward, tears streaming. "Vera, I can't believe how you've grown into the person you are today." Vera blushed slightly, offering a gentle smile. "Please don't cry, Mom. I'm home to share everything with you." Her older sister, Anna Williams, freshly graduated with a law degree, beamed at Vera. "You've come just in time for the gala. My fiancé, Long, will be there tonight, too." Vera smiled brightly. "Then tonight I'll tell both of you all about Mr. Sterling." That evening, the Grand Hall of the Royal London School of Nursing was packed with guests, professors, alumni, and accomplished graduates. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, tables were draped in pristine white linens, and white and lavender roses adorned the entrance. Dressed in a pale blue lace gown, Vera stepped onto the stage to receive her Distinguished Nurse Alumni Award and wore a proud smile. After accepting the honor, she descended the stage and was embraced by her parents. Mrs. June asked gently, "Do you have something you'd like to say?" Vera looked around, then took her parents' hands and led them to a quieter corner. "Mom, Dad. I want to bring Christopher Sterling home to become my husband." Her voice trembled slightly. Mr. Henry furrowed his brow, momentarily puzzled. Christopher Sterling? We have heard of him. Please tell us more. Vera recounted how she first volunteered at the hospital to care for him, through the darkest nights changing his bandages, and on to their work building sterling hope together. As her parents listened and nodded, her mother asked, "You love him?" Vera smiled. "Yes. Mr. Sterling showed me hope when he believed he would never live a full life again. I want to marry him so that even if he remains disabled, I can stand by him, because of love, not because of any contract or obligation." Mr. Henry was silent for a moment before breaking into a gentle smile. "If you truly love him and trust him, we will support you. We only hope you will be happy." Tears welled in Vera's eyes as she leaned forward. "Thank you, Mom and Dad. I promise to make Mr. Sterling happy." In June, the summer showers arrived, no longer bitterly cold but rather a gentle patter on the roof, making London feel delightfully dreamy. At the Sterling mansion, wedding preparations were in full swing. The second-floor hallway was now draped with swags of white and lavender roses intertwined with fresh green foliage, heralding a vibrant summer celebration. On the eve of their wedding, the family gathered in the spacious drawing room. Small white envelopes, each containing heartfelt well-wishes, were arranged around a round table lit by scented candles. Mrs. Margaret poured a lemon tea for Vera, while Julius, the butler, brought out the wedding rings, a pair of simple yet intricately engraved white silver bands. Christopher knelt before Vera, his voice trembling as he slid the first ring onto her left ring finger. "Vera, you have stood by me through every storm, from the moment you walked into my life to our journey building the house of love. I vow to be your foundation for all my days. Will you marry me?" Vera bowed her head, tears glistening in her eyes. "What can I say? I have loved you through your darkest days. I am so happy. Yes, I will." Christopher then handed the second ring to Margaret, and she gently pressed it onto his left ring finger, caressing it lightly. "You deserve this happiness." Vera's mother, Mrs. June, stepped forward and embraced her daughter. "You deserve every bit of it. From now on, you have a larger family filled with love." Applause rang through the room. The summer rain tapped in harmony on the eaves, and the fragrance of roses drifted through the air, signaling that their staff of power had united, turning the summer showers into a promise of rainbows. The next morning dawned bright and rare between rainfalls. Soft sunlight filtered through the trees, illuminating the Sterling mansion's garden. White folding chairs were arranged in 2 rows facing each other, framing a petal-strewn aisle of pale lavender hydrangeas interlaced with silvery green foliage, an enchanting summer wedding tableau. Guests included members of the Sterling and Williams families, along with Sterling Ventures and Sterling Hope Partners. Their attire blended British formality with modern elegance. The Turners and the Lawsons were among the first to greet attendees. Vera stepped forward in a pure white wedding gown of hand-embroidered lace, the skirt billowing lightly with each step. A sheer veil, adorned with tiny crystals, draped her back, catching the sunlight with every movement. She walked down the flower-lined aisle, her gaze fixed on Christopher, who awaited her in an electric silver wheelchair draped in silk. He wore a tailored charcoal gray suit and a pristine white tie, blending classic style with a hint of modernity. As the organist began to play 1,000 Years by Christina Perri, the air seemed to stand still. Vera moved gracefully, her eyes locked onto Christopher's bright ones. When she reached the end of the aisle, he rose, steadying himself on the arms of his wheelchair, and smiled radiantly. "You shine like the summer sun." Vera nodded, her voice quivering slightly. "And you are like a ray of sunshine breaking through the clouds." They faced the officiant beneath a floral arch of white and pink orchids. A pair of doves cooed overhead from a nearby rose garden, providing a gentle natural accompaniment. "Friends and family, we gather here today to witness the union of 2 hearts that have endured many storms. Christopher Sterling and Vera Williams, do you vow to uphold this promise forever? Vera and Christopher exchanged rings, sealing their lives together by a vow that echoed throughout the garden. As the ceremony concluded, hundreds of white and lavender petals floated down from the bridesmaids and groomsmen, carried by trumpet fanfare into the summer sky, heralding a beautifully complete beginning. After the wedding, Christopher and Vera spent their honeymoon in Cornwall, the southwestern coast of England, where rugged rock formations met broad, golden beaches. Their seaside cottage near the Helford estuary, built of smooth grey stone with a moss-green wooden door, served as the perfect sanctuary for a tranquil getaway. On their first day, the blue-green bay sparkled under the sun, the waves rolling in a gentle rhythm like a lullaby. Christopher had arranged for an all-terrain wheelchair, capable of traversing sand dunes, so they could explore the beach together. Hand in hand, their feet didn't touch the sand, but their hearts soared with every wave. Vera looked deeply into his eyes and smiled brightly. Standing here with you, I taste happiness like a drop of honey. Christopher drew in the briny sea air. I feel the same. I once thought I'd never see morning light again. But you've taught me that dawn is always ahead, if we dare to hope. They built a sandcastle together, Vera waving toward the towering dunes, while Christopher carefully molded wet sand around the foundation from his wheelchair. Laughter rang out beneath the vast blue sky. Returning to London afterward, they carried renewed spirits. The House of Love had begun receiving its first patients. Though the new centre was only days old, hopeful faces and eager footsteps already filled its entrance. The physical therapy wing was modern and well-equipped, the counseling rooms were warm and inviting, the arts and crafts workshop buzzed with joyful voices. Vera continued coordinating daily operations, while Christopher frequently attended scholarship ceremonies and handed out vocational training certificates. One sunny July morning, they visited the celebration room, where children with disabilities proudly displayed their handcrafted paintings and pottery. A little boy in a wheelchair named Tom, bright-eyed and beaming, showed them his drawing of a vibrant rainbow. He stammered with emotion, I painted this for you both. Because you gave me hope." Vera and Christopher shared a tender smile and held each other's hands. Warmth surged through their hearts, knowing they had touched each fragile life. Over the next 2 years, the House of Love grew, opening 2 additional branches in Birmingham and Manchester. Sterling Ventures also expanded into telehealth technology, enabling rural patients with disabilities to connect with doctors via a mobile app, an initiative Vera had proposed. At the year-end shareholders meeting, where Sterling Ventures' financial results and community impact were presented, Christopher stood alongside Vera and spoke confidently. "We are committed not only to profit but also to social responsibility. For every £10 of revenue, we dedicate £1 to the Sterling Hope Fund. In the future, we will continue developing our integrated care model and spread hope across the United Kingdom." Thunderous applause filled the room. Vera looked at him, her eyes alight with joy. 5 years after his rebirth and now a decade since Sterling Ventures' founding, Christopher and Vera stood together on the rooftop terrace of the Sterling Mansion, gazing west over London. Soft electronic music drifted from a small party about to begin below, but they only had eyes for each other. "Do you remember the first day you came to the hospital and I rudely sent you away?" Vera asked with a bittersweet smile. "It all seems like a dream now." Christopher took her hand, locking his gaze with hers. "Now I know every challenge led me to something better. Without my suffering, I would never have appreciated this happiness." Vera leaned her head on his shoulder. "I only wish for us to stay together, sharing every joy and sorrow." The sunset painted the sky in endless romantic hues. A gentle breeze carried drifting white and lavender rose petals through the air, as if bestowing blessings upon them. After the evening's festivities, they walked hand in hand along the cobblestone path. Behind them, London twinkled with lights, the Thames flowing quietly at their side. Ahead of them lay a future brimming with hope and new dreams. And in their hearts, a love that had begun in their darkest days now shone like the sweetest dawn over a resplendent London.